Good evening, dear friends. We'll gather up for our plenary session in about 5 minutes, so you can make your way to your seats. Thank you. Good evening, dear friends. St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of all the Coast Salish tribes. Good evening and welcome to St. Mark's Cathedral. My name is Steve Thomason. I serve as the Cathedral Dean here. If you need any assistance this evening, please see one of the ushers that have name tags on like this. Water stations and restrooms are in the narthex or the foyer. There's all gender restrooms that can be accessed a few steps up this way or via the elevator in that corner. We would ask that you please silence your phones and other devices at this time. This cathedral stands as a house of prayer for all people, a beacon of hope for this region and the world, a place for the arts to find expression and for the work of justice, including the care of creation, to be the gathering principles that guide who we are in the world. In the great tradition of historic cathedrals across the globe, St. Mark's strives to serve as a commons, That is, as a center for reasoned discourse where people from the broader community, like yourselves, can find safe haven for respectful dialogue, even when we may disagree. Diversity is welcomed here, and we are the richer for it. I want to offer a few words of thanks to various people tonight. First, with gratitude to the members of St. Mark's Visual Arts Ministry, the Creation Care Ministry, and the Intergenerational Ministry for their work in planning and hosting this event's gathering. We also want to acknowledge and give thanks to Eric Morse and Ben Browner of Orbis Globes for bringing Terra to us this month. We are honored and grateful to serve as host for the North American premiere of this wonderful artistic rendering of the earth that invites rich theological and ecological reflection, which is what tonight is all about. We also want to thank our community partners who are present tonight, offering resource tables and opportunities to engage one another. These include communities of faith, the Episcopal Diocese of Western Washington, the Diocese of Olympia, First Church Seattle, St. James Cathedral, St. Joseph Parish, St. Mark's Cathedral, University Unitarian Church, and community groups working in the climate justice areas, including the Duwamish River Community Coalition, Empower Me, Faith Action Network, Tree Action Seattle, Save Our Wild Salmon, and the Third Act of Washington. We are also grateful to have with us this evening staff from the Queen Anne Book Company, and they do have books on climate change for purchase. I commend those to you as well. We hope you have a chance to visit all of these resource tables and will maybe again as our evening comes to a close. But now we turn to our keynote address and the conversation to follow. A word about the flow of the evening from here. Dr. Gromlich will offer her reflections and invite us into the thin places of reflection. We will then have a facilitated Q&A session. Questions must be written and they will be curated. There are notepads and pencils on the back tables and in the narthex as well. For those on live stream, you can enter your question in the chat window and a Cathedral staff member will collect those. I doubt we'll have time for every question, but we'll look for themes in the questions shared. But now it's my great privilege to introduce our featured speaker, whom I count as friend and colleague, and who was raised up for ordination from this Cathedral community. The Reverend Dr. Lisa Gromlich is Professor Emerita in the School of Environment and Forest Sciences and Dean Emerita of the College of the Environment at the University of Washington. She devotes her career to studying the causes and impacts of climate change, with a special focus on using paleoecological records such as tree rings to understand the magnitude of the impacts on lives and livelihoods. As a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Ecological Society of America, and the Aldo Leopold Leadership Program, and past president of the American Geophysical Union, she wields decades of climate research to understand our changing planet. Ordained as an Episcopal deacon in 2023 and serving now at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Tucson, Arizona. It doesn't rain as much there, I don't think. Dr. Gromlich bridges the worlds of rigorous science and sacred ministry. She is building bridges between faith and reasoned communities as we forge an equitable, sustainable earth where all people can thrive. Her career dedication to understanding global climate change now serves a sacred mission, awakening both scientific and spiritual communities to our shared responsibilities for creation's future. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Gromlich to the lectern?
We gather tonight in a thin place. We gather beneath Terra, our planetary home suspended above us. We gather in this cathedral, built to lift our eyes upward, to remind us that we inhabit more than the material world. We gather because something in us knows that this climate crisis is sacred work, not merely technical work. And we gather with wisdom from across traditions because thin places, liminal places where heaven and earth grow close are recognized everywhere. We learn from Celtic Christianity about mountains at dawn and shorelines at dusk, ancient groves and sacred wells, places where the veil between material and transcendent grows permeable. We learn from indigenous peoples across the world who have always known sacred sites where the ordinary becomes luminous, where ancestors walk close, where the land itself speaks, and where we feel held by something much larger than ourselves. We remember with Jewish mystics those moments when the curtains between worlds part. Think of Moses at the burning bush, or Jacob dreaming of angels ascending and descending. How awesome is this place, Jacob says upon waking. This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. We learn from Buddhists about bardo, threshold spaces, in between places where transformation becomes possible. We recognize with Japanese wisdom the word yugen, a profound awareness of the universe that triggers feelings too deep for words, often experienced in nature's liminal moments. Across traditions, we know this. There are places and moments when reality's deeper structure becomes visible, when we truly see, when the ordinary reveals itself as holy. And tonight we stand in such a place, not to receive answers, but to let ourselves be changed, not for solutions, but to open our eyes. So let us begin by seeing. I'm going to ask you to do something together, something that might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but I invite you to stay with it. Look up at Terra. Really look. Let your eyes soften. Notice all those blues. How many shades can you see? Watch the swirls of white cloud and the brown and greens of continents against endless blue of the world's ocean. Just gaze and be present while you're seeing. Keep breathing. what you just experienced, that shift in seeing, astronauts describe something similar when they first glimpse Earth from space, and they call it the overview effect. From orbit, borders vanish. The lines we've drawn on maps, the divisions we've made between nations and people and ecosystems, none of them are visible. What you see instead is one interconnected whole. The atmosphere, that thin blue line protecting all life, looks terrifyingly fragile from space. You can see how delicate it is, how precious. Every human conflict, every war over territory or war over resource suddenly becomes absurd when you're looking at our shared home suspended in the void. So, astronauts don't return from space just wanting better solar panels or more efficient cars. They return changed. They describe feeling a protective love for the Earth, a sense of profound connection to every living thing, an understanding that we are all, every single one of us, part of one body. This is the thin place experience. The veil drops, reality's deeper structure becomes visible. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Now, as a climate scientist, I can tell you climate science gives us the same view, but through data instead of orbit. We don't need to leave Earth's surface to see what astronauts see from space. The science reveals it. So, when I was a very early career scientist, I encountered a diagram that changed my life. It's a diagram of Earth as a system. For several of you in this audience, you would know it as the Bretherton diagram, named after Francis Bretherton. And it shows how the atmosphere and the ocean and the land and the biosphere and the ice are all connected by arrows showing the flow of energy and matter between them. And it was a spiritual experience while sitting in a university auditorium. Because what I was seeing was the same truth mystics have always known. There are no separate things. There are only relationship, only flow, only infinite exchange. The ocean breathes carbon into the atmosphere. The atmosphere weeps rain onto the land. Plants drink light and exhale oxygen. Ice reflects sunlight, preventing heat absorption that would otherwise warm the planet. Tiny phytoplankton in the ocean produce half the oxygen we breathe. Every other breath you take comes from organisms you'll never see, in water you will never touch. This is what Earth system science reveals. We live inside a body. We live inside a body. So, we are in church, not a science classroom. So it's okay to respond together. So I want you to say it with me quietly. We live inside a body. We live inside a body. Not on a planet, not using a resource. We live inside a body. It's a planetary body with a circulatory system. It has ocean currents moving heat and nutrients around the globe. It's a body with a respiratory system, the carbon cycling in and out across seasons and centuries. It's a body with regulatory systems, climate feedbacks that have sustained life on Earth for billions of years. This is not a metaphor. It's measurable, it's quantifiable. It's poetry written in chemistry and physics. So, look at Tara again while I speak. Water is moving from ocean to cloud to rain to river to ocean. The same water the dinosaurs drank, the same water that will quench the thirst of your great-great-grandchildren. Nothing is wasted. Everything returns. This is resurrection. Carbon cycles through rock and oceans and atmosphere and bone and leaf. You are made of stars, yes, but also of ancient plankton, of Cretaceous ferns, of your grandmother's last breath released to the sky. This is communion. Nitrogen, fixed by bacteria, taken up by plants, eaten by animals, returned to the soil by death and decay, lifted again into new life. This is the Paschal mystery. Death feeding life, life returning to death, the wheel always turning. Earth system science does not diminish the sacred. It reveals the sacred's inner working. It shows us the face of God in differential equations. It proves what faith has always proclaimed, that all things hold together. There is one web, one body, one breath, breathing through all. But here's what Earth system science shows us, and this is where the thin place becomes uncomfortable, as thin places often do. We are pushing Earth's systems past the boundary of safe operating space. Scientists have identified 9 planetary boundaries, thresholds that, if crossed, could trigger irreversible changes to the Earth system. Think of them as the body's vital signs, and we've already crossed several. Climate change. The fever is rising. Biodiversity loss. Vital organs are failing. Nitrogen and phosphorus cycles. The blood chemistry is dangerously imbalanced. Land system change. Living tissue is scarred and hardened. We're not just changing the weather, we are destabilizing the relationships that make life possible. We're breaking the cycles, we're interrupting the breath, we are severing the connections that have held for millions of years. The Bretherton diagram showed me a body, intricate, beautiful, and whole. What we're doing is dismembering that body. So you don't heal a body you're actively dismembering by giving it better bandages. And I would argue that technology often treats symptoms, not disease. New technologies, renewable energy, electric vehicles, carbon capture, these are wonderful, and truly they matter, and I say this as someone who has spent decades working in the solution space. But they don't address why we've consumed so relentlessly in the first place. We can swap out every light bulb and still carry that same insatiable hunger that created the crisis. The illness is spiritual, a belief that more is better, that Earth exists for our extraction, that we are separate rather than a part of creation. We have worshiped at the wrong altars. So here's what I've learned as decades as a climate scientist. We've had the technology for years. The barrier isn't knowledge or capability. It is will, it is values, it's what we love and what we're willing to sacrifice. And as a climate scientist, I can give you the data, but as a deacon, I can name what this reality is, and it is a crisis of the soul. Pope Francis, in his encyclical Laudato Si', calls for what he terms ecological conversion, a fundamental reorientation of how we see ourselves in relationship to creation. Not managers, not consumers, but members. Not users, but belongers. This isn't about adding environmental concern to our existing worldview. It's metanoia, that Greek word for repentance that means literally to change your mind, to turn completely around. It's a transformation of perception that changes everything downstream. When we truly convert, when we move from seeing the earth as a resource to recognizing earth as kin, as the body we inhabit as sacred, then our actions flow naturally from that new seeing. We don't have to guilt ourselves into better behavior. We respond from love, from relationship, from recognition of who we really are. So think about it. Renewable energy flows naturally from ecological conversion. When we see the earth as kin, of course we want to stop harming it. But the reverse doesn't work. If we install solar panels, it doesn't necessarily change our heart. This is the work Thin Places to call us to do, to see truly, then live from what we've seen. So look up at tarot once more, but this time, see it as Earth system science reveals it. It is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. Every part in relationship, every element in exchange, one breath, one body, one sacred whole. Now ask, what would it mean to live as if we believed what we're seeing? Not alone. You can't hold this vision alone. You cannot live it alone, but together, as communities, as the body gathered, as people who have stood in this thin place and let it change us. Thin places reveal what's always been true. We need each other. We were never meant to do this alone. The climate crisis is calling us back to the ancient truth that both science and faith proclaim. We are one body. What hurts one part hurts the whole. What heals moves through the whole. So the question isn't, what can I do? The question is, what can we become together? And here's where the usual climate conversation goes profoundly wrong. It sends us home to change our light bulbs and calculate our carbon footprint and either feel guilty or feel quite virtuous in isolation. It focuses relentlessly on individual action. But thin places don't reveal isolated individuals making consumer choices. They reveal interconnections. They show us we're woven together with each other, with creation, and across time. And the spiritual transformation we need isn't just personal, it is communal. It is ecclesiastical. It means gathered assembly, people called together for common purpose. When we stand in thin places together, we remember who we actually are, the body, the living whole, one living whole. So, what does collective conversion look like? Let me suggest two movements that matter here. The Hebrew prophets didn't just teach personal piety. They challenged systems. They stood in public squares and named injustice. They spoke for those who couldn't speak, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the land itself crying out. Jesus stood in this prophetic tradition, proclaiming good news to the poor and challenging systems of power. Climate change is a justice issue. It hits hardest to those who contributed least, island nations drowning, communities on the front line of extraction, species with no vote and no voice. Personal lifestyle changes cannot address systemic injustice. We need collective prophetic voice. This means faith communities using our moral authority to demand policy that protects the vulnerable, not just the profitable. This means learning from frontline communities and standing with them in solidarity in how we vote, what policies we support, where resources flow. This means disrupting business as usual when business as usual is dismembering the body. Naming what we see, not softening it, not making it comfortable, but telling the truth about what Earth system science reveals. We are in crisis, and it demands transformation. The prophets didn't whisper. They didn't stay polite. They loved too fiercely for that. Our planetary boundaries are being crossed. That's the land crying out, and can we hear it? Will we speak for it? Second, look around this space. The cathedral carries a tradition. The great medieval cathedrals weren't built for quarterly earnings. They weren't built for the people who laid the first stones. Construction often spanned generations, with builders dying before the roof went on. They were built for centuries they would never see. And they understood something that we may have forgotten. Faithfulness means living for a future beyond our lives. It means planting trees we'll never sit under. It means restoring soil that will feed children not yet born. It means protecting species that will outlive us if we choose to let them. This long view is a spiritual practice. It's an antidote to despair and to the frantic short-termism that got us here. Collectively, we can hold time horizons that individuals cannot hold alone. Congregations that steward land across generations, restoring, rewilding, holding it in trust for those who come after. Endowments invested not for maximum return, but for 7 generations forward. Liturgical rhythms that reconnect us to deep time, marking solstices, blessing seeds, grieving extinctions, remembering we are part of cycles far longer than our individual lives. intergenerational witness, elders teaching what they've seen, children asking us to account for what we're leaving them. All of us holding that story together. We sustain each other for the long work because individuals burn out, but communities can carry that vision across decades. This is what the cathedral teaches: collective work, beauty as offering, building towards a future we trust even when we cannot see it. So this is it: prophetic witness and the long view, speaking truth to power and planting for centuries ahead, disrupting systems and building alternatives that can outlast us. Not individual actions born out of isolation and guilt, but communities practicing resurrection, the ancient art of bringing life from death, hope from grief, new possibilities from systems that seem immovable. We are being called to do what those cathedral builders did. Not with stones, but with our lives, our choices, our love, offered not alone, but together. To stand as prophets, speaking out for what cannot speak, challenging what must be challenged, bearing witness to both the damage and the beauty. And to take the long view, building for futures we will never see, holding hope against generations, sustaining each other for work that will not be finished in our lifetimes. That is what collective conversion looks like. And this is what the thin places call forward. It's not consumers making better individual choices and isolations, but it is the body gathered, seeing truly, speaking boldly, building faithfully, holding each other as we learn to live as we believe what Earth system science and faith both proclaim. Everything is connected. Everything belongs. We are woven together in a web so vast and beautiful it can only be called holy. And what we do together matters across time, across species, across the thin boundary between heaven and earth. The question is, will we let ourselves see it? And having seen, will we gather together to live that vision? Say with me, we will gather. We will gather. Not scatter to individual action, not retreat into private guilt. We will gather as prophets, as builders, as the body that sees truly and acts together. This is the invitation, this is the call. Not to fix things alone, but to become together what this moment requires. Communities of witnesses, communities of the long view, communities practicing the ancient art of resurrection in a time of profound dismemberment. The cathedral builders knew we build for what we love, across time we'll never see, with others whose names we may never know. So let us build together for love, for the earth, for the thin places where heaven and earth meet and everything becomes possible again. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gromlich. A reminder that we have cards on the back tables. If you want to ask Dr. Gromlich a question, we ask that you write it down and hand it to one of the ushers. They'll curate those findings and we'll bring those forward for us. While we're waiting on a few questions to come, I'll ask just a couple. I know you've been in the space at least a couple of times in recent days engaging Terra. Tell us about those experiences and what you were striving to do and what did you discover?
Thank you for that question, Steve. So this is my world on some level as a scientist, and we have been so pleased as a scientific community to see the great work of NASA scientists that have made these kinds of visualizations available to us. So, to be honest, Steve, I go to meetings and there's one of these things in the NASA booth and it's cool and, it's and I'm in with my 20,000 favorite scientists and we just kind of that's what NASA does. And it's that whole question of how context matters. I have never sat in meditation beneath it as it slowly rotates in a cathedral that is, of course, very dear to my heart. And I felt deeply moved by the beauty of something that, to me, I have seen probably hundreds of times, but not here and not in this space. And so I've been coming in and out at different times and in different contexts. And earlier this afternoon, I had kind of randomly run into some people and encouraged them to come, and they weren't scientists, and they were sitting 3 generations of people, of a family sitting towards the back, and witnessing their awe and wonder across 3 generations made me realize that this is such a human feeling of, you cannot but feel the love of this blue planet when you see it. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know many others, myself included, have had similar experiences and reactions in these last 2 weeks, with one more week to go in the exhibition. So that's a local-oriented question. Now I'll go global. COP30 is occurring right now in Brazil. As I recall, you were attendee at COP28 and 29. Tell us what that is all about and why is that annual conference important?
Oh, Steve, it's so important. And I've actually been at 4 of them, and I'm a virtual delegate to this one, which means with poor internet, I can kind of get a bit in. This annual conference is often portrayed in the same narrative time after time. World leaders come together to try to solve a global governance issue about reducing the burning of fossil fuels to keep the climate crisis at bay, and they fail miserably, and it all is, it can be portrayed in the press as like a silly endeavor, if not worse. And I am dismayed to see that we not only have, at the national level, none of our federal government officials are there, and in fact, the major U.S. press is not there. As a participant, what you don't see, what the press doesn't see and what the media does not show, is that in addition to the official negotiations, which lumber on making slow progress in the midst of a planetary crisis, which is incredibly frightening, is the 2/3 of the people attending, literally tens of thousands of people, are delegates, many of them from the global south, that are sharing capacity building strategies, working with philanthropists to develop finance mechanisms, building strategic alliances that, this is such a big deal. At COP30, one of the things that is being underreported is the fact for the first time there is a major initiative for tropical forest preservation, about preserving the national forest, that is being put forward by the Global South, funded initially by Brazil and Indonesia, and represents a flipping of the script of who is actually making decisions about resources. And it's something that I realized I saw developing in these kind of small conferences, and the way, you don't create a global alliance of literally 53 countries with a Zoom call or two. It was that trusted in-person relationship building across cultures that gives me hope that there is a new phase of global governance where there is an empowerment of the land-based global South moving forward in a way that we haven't seen it before. So watch that. I mean, the reduction in emissions will falter, but this deforestation piece, I believe, has legs.
Are there questions to share? Yes. While those are coming up, can I throw you a little harder one?
Oh, keep them coming.
All right. So, this question is not a political one. It's really a sincere one trying to understand. Bill Gates made a pronouncement a couple of weeks ago that is hard to interpret in a positive way. That's my statement. Can you help me understand what's there?
I share your perception that it is hard to interpret, and I also share the dismay that many may feel that it is being interpreted and almost weaponized by people for whom the climate crisis is something that they see as far less important than what many of those of us who have studied it literally for our entire careers see. In the spirit of seeking to understand the mind and heart of a complex, incredibly wealthy person who has dedicated his life to thinking about how to ease the suffering systemically of poor people, particularly in the global South. He is calling on the community to be aware of the costs and the issues of adaptation to climate catastrophes that are coming, particularly in the areas of agriculture and food security. The way he framed it and the timing of it, I feel like has played into a counter-narrative that climate change per se is not important at a time in which in the US we have seen the scientists who are funded to do this important work, the federal agencies that support that science, dismantled. So I believe in reading the memo, there was some subtlety and nuance that got missed. I grieve the fact that a man of his means could not have created a message that if that is truly how he felt, was not more universally understood.
Thank you. So with that, what gives you hope? How can we nurture young people who are in despair?
First of all, we need to name the despair. And I am really happy that I know some young people that are in the crowd tonight, and that I think it is particularly important for, Steve, my generation. I'm kind of bringing you into my
I'm with you.
Okay. That we acknowledge the legacy that we are leaving that generation, and do it with honesty and sincerity, and support them in looking at the world with wide eyes, and knowing that we have created urgency for their own actions that we did not have to feel when we were their age. I think supporting them to be brave and imaginative, and to gain the skills to gather together to imagine a different world, is the best gift that we can give them, and to get the heck out of the way.
Can you say amen to that? Yeah. Thank you. How did you first experience the Episcopal liturgy as a client Simonist?
Read that to me again, Steve, please. How did I first?
How did you first experience Episcopal liturgy as a client scientist?
Okay, I'm with friends here. I don't know who's out there on the Zoom. As a climate scientist, coming of age when it was not a really friendly place for young, ambitious women, I very much walked away from the Episcopal Church. And so I would say there was a nice hiatus where I was developing myself as a climate scientist, and anything that the liturgy, because it was embedded in a place that felt less welcoming to me, and an identity where I felt like, were I to be a successful scientist, I could not reveal that I was a person of faith, was fraught. The great thing about time is that some of that brittleness one can feel and defensiveness can start to melt away. And for me, the Episcopal liturgy reminded me of those cycles, those liturgical cycles, and the scriptures again and again, and the sheer comfort of what that liturgy, how it evoked my earliest memories of what being in church and thinking about the sacred and the divine meant. And so it was like coming back to a place where I could reveal to my own heart the degree to which this was meaningful. And I was going to get brave about actually saying out loud that I'm a scientist and a person of faith. And Steve, quite honestly, you helped me along the way, particularly in some of my early days.
I think your mother had an instrumental piece in it too, right?
Absolutely. My mother was an Episcopal deacon, part of a wave of women that were ordained in the 1980s, and she was fierce and loving.
Great. Would you discuss some of the ways you've seen communities do what you're calling for, especially helping community members connect this sense of the divine with the natural world? This rotating globe is a great example, I know. Some of the ways you've seen communities do what you're calling for.
So what I'd like about that question is, inherent in that is a call to start where you are. And right now, there are some real obvious ways in which the food crisis that we are experiencing because of a pullback on federal support for food aid all of a sudden means that community gardening and ways in which we touch soil and bring life out of soil and feed our neighbors becomes a particularly critical gift, and it's something I've seen happen in the developing of anything that sort of touches the food system, whether it's growing food together, whether it's distributing food together, whether it's just, all of the pieces of food ministries are places where it's everything from, sort of the feel of soil in our hands and how that can be a spiritual experience to the incredible opportunities for interfaith collaborations in working in a systemic crisis that we are facing. I also believe it's interesting that we started with we had a question about sort of liturgical aspects. I have become increasingly a big fan of, I love the season of creation. It's great. We have a month where we do season of creation. I want season of creation like 365 days per year. And I am discovering resources for that. There's actually a green lectionary podcast I just discovered. There are ways in which, I alluded to it briefly in the talk, where how we worship needs to include both the lament that we feel on a daily basis, but also the joy and the celebration of the beauty of creation. And it needs to be so just woven into things that it's just what we do.
I was mindful as you were delivering your talk, the ways you were describing the cathedral, and almost 100 years ago, the people who did build what was built had this vision of these pillars, these 4 pillars. The stanchions that they actually support the weight are much smaller, but they built around this, they're hollow inside. They built them so that they would resemble or remind us of the great conifers of the Pacific Northwest, and up to the canopy.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Several of us in conversation were talking about how the architecture of this cathedral is such a great home for Tara. It's sparse, but it has so many sort of natural elements, and that are sort of only adorned with their natural beauty. So, I can see, and we often talk about the old growth in the Pacific Northwest in particular as being cathedral-like, and that ways in which our cathedrals mimic nature and nature mimics our cathedral, and it all evokes some of the most profound love of the earth that we all feel.
A few more questions. This is a corollary to that last one. How can we move community members to take action and prevent becoming overwhelmed?
Oh my gosh. You know what? You should be overwhelmed. It is overwhelming. And you know what? If you're not overwhelmed, this is somebody else's saying. If you're not overwhelmed at times, you are not paying attention. So, first of all, overwhelm. And the call in my talk was, don't be overwhelmed alone. This is something that there is fear and anxiety and despair that we are all feeling. And the first piece is to be able to share that. And there's like neuroscientists that like talk about how if we can't initially feel the despair and the overwhelm and fully metabolize it, this is a word they use, we cannot free ourselves to have the kind of big, imaginative, transformative ideas that we need to have to collectively navigate this future. So, but I hope part of what you are hearing tonight is this is a long process, and that overwhelm you feel, you have to pace and care for yourself and then find the strength to keep going. But it's, and I also feel like this is, something that really drew me back into the church was we have collective rituals of lament. And the fact that is a part of what we do in community is something that it's almost like I want to trademark it and kind of like sell it, like, come to church, be sad with people. Like we're good at that, but we move forward from that.
Yeah. So this is a question that builds off that. Do you have suggestions of how we can gather? We activists are caught in the political strategy of specific doings. There is need for a huge shift in focus and action. How do we gather?
First of all, the easiest way to gather tends to be in our bubble, where we get the people that we know we agree with to kind of come together and lament. It's okay, like we lament, and then we make strategies. But that will be very sterile and not effective if we don't find ways to gather in coalitions that are uncomfortable at times because of not just the identity diversity, but the ways in which different ideas are brought together about what is important and how to act and how do we gather across difference. And it's not easy, and it's a muscle. And I truly believe, how like when you go to places that sell fitness supplies, they have always these cute little dumbbells. They're often in pastel colors, they're the easy ones, you're supposed to like use. And I feel like there's some gatherings we can have where it's that person across the street, we share a neighborhood. We're not quite sure how they feel, but that like gathering collectively, both in places where we have commonality, but across these differences, and start small. Develop these muscles of being able to have conversations that are about heartfelt values that start to go below the sort of political chattering that is up on top and find our common humanity. It's just like going to the gym.
Build the muscle.
Build the muscle.
Yep. Can you speak to the difference between Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, and Arizona in terms of our care and concern for the earth? Is that concern manifested differently in the two
Oh my
regions?
goodness. Kind of yes and no. So, first of all, there is a starkness to being in the desert of southern Arizona, where it is hot and dry, and if you do not have enough water, like you die. There's a starkness to that. And during heat emergencies, or actually just during kind of regular summer in Tucson, Arizona, the community, and it's like when it gets over 110 and 115, just little simple things like everybody, like little businesses, big businesses, everybody has, those big orange things of water, like you see at football games and stuff. Like everybody has big orange things of water outside all over the neighborhoods. And, I'm sure a couple of you have spare water bottles, those water bottles that you got, you don't know what to do with. Everybody puts their spare water bottles out and ensures that everybody has water. And there's a starkness to that. Like, if we don't take care of each other, so I don't want to be silly here, but, there's like, we're in Seattle, like, yeah, it's cold and rainy, and one can die of hypothermia at 40 degrees when you're soaking wet. That said, there is a kind of gentleness to this, and there is a way in which the starkness of the climate crisis is... Actually, don't they, like... Isn't it sort of Upper Michigan and Washington the places you're supposed to move to if you care about, maintaining... I mean, it's like it's supposed to be this mecca for people trying to escape climate crisis. And it means it's really easy to forget about it until we get our big heat domes that we have here. Yeah. So I think to me, that is the biggest difference, is that Southern Arizona is in its entirety a frontline community.
Yeah. Your thoughts on Earth as a sentient being? Does she have a soul, as in Gaia? Is the human collective also part of Gaia's body, the way you referenced? And as a species, how do you view humans and our role as co-creators in our reality? I think I'll stop there. So,
okay, can I just say yes? Do I... That's a great question, and I feel like I need to unpack it about what a soul might be, because does Gaia have a soul? Implying for me, I'll answer it in my own words, which is a ongoing alpha to omega universality of being. And I would say clearly yes. And I kind of forget the nuances of that, but I think that's also a question. One of the things I like about being Episcopalian is, like, we're really good at, like, we don't always have the answers. We just have really good questions. I think that's up there with that, like, really good questions that we all, like, how we wrestle with questions. I think that's a really good question to wrestle with.
And we're also comfortable reflecting in the realm of metaphor and allegory. And as we reflect theologically, any of our language orienting to God is all metaphorical, or it's all pointing toward but not appropriating fully.
Exactly. Agree.
All right, just one or two more. Our resistance to taking responsibility for climate seems to be part of the greater body. How does the body resist its responsibility to care?
Can you read that one again?
Yeah.
Can you read that one again?
I think our resistance to taking responsibility for climate, change, seems to be part of the greater body. Or I might just reframe it if I understand it correctly. Our resistance to taking responsibility to climate change is something of the whole body's reality.
Yeah.
And so how do we take responsibility? I think you've referenced
Okay,
this.
so how do we take responsibility? First, I think you only take responsibility for things that you truly see. And that was a point I was trying to say, which is like, if there's many consumer actions, shall we call them, getting solar panels, whatever, recycling, that don't fundamentally change how we see ourselves in relationship to the earth as a system. And until we actually fully take in that reality, we will never have the momentum and the will and the fortitude to make the kinds of changes that we need to make.
I think we'll leave it there. Will you express your gratitude and join me in doing so for Dr. Elisa Gromlich? Thank you. Thank you. I also want to thank again the Visual Arts Ministry, the Creation Care Ministry, and Intergenerational Ministries here at St. Mark's for hosting us this evening. Greg Block, I think, up on live stream, and greetings to those joining via live stream, and Michael Pereira, who's managing our PA sound system as well. We will have time, and we encourage you to make your way around to all of the resource tables and our community partners again, and Queen Anne Book Company over there with some really great resources. Here's what I would propose. Let's take just 5 minutes. We'll take the lights out. There will be considerable ambient light from Terra, and sit with that, and then we'll bring the lights back up for a bit of time for you to make your way around the tables. I would encourage you to move different perspectives when the lights are out. It's really quite dramatic, and you can get different perspectives of the globe from different parts of the cathedral. So Michael, if you'll turn out the lights, and we'll bring them back up here in about 5 minutes to be able to make it to all the resource tables. Thank you.